அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். A Talk A Week-இன் 18வது நிகழ்ச்சிக்காக தங்கள் அனைவரையும் சந்திப்பதில் பெரும் மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறோம். இன்றைய நிகழ்ச்சிக்கு ஹான்சன் தம்பி பிரேம் அவர்கள் அனிமல்ஸ் இன் டிசாஸ்டர் பற்றி கருத்துரை வழங்க உள்ளார்கள். அவரை பற்றி சில விஷயங்கள் பார்ப்போம். அவருக்கு 15 அவர் நம்ம காலேஜில் MSW வந்து 2002 to 2004 முடிச்சிருக்காரு. 15 வருடங்களாக டிசாஸ்டர் மேனேஜ்மெண்ட், சஸ்டைனபிள் லைவ்லிஹுட் அண்ட் என்வாயன்மெண்டல் கன்சர்வேஷன்ல அவருக்கு அனுபவங்கள் இருக்கிறது. அது மட்டும் இல்லாம சுனாமி ரிலீஃப் ப்ராஜெக்ட்ஸ்ல வந்து நிறைய பணி செய்திருக்கிறாரு. நிறைய பேப்பர்ஸ் வந்து ப்ரெசென்ட் பண்ணி இன்டர்நேஷனல் கான்ஃபரன்சஸ்ல வந்து பேப்பர்ஸ் ப்ரெசன்டேஷன் பண்ணியிருக்காரு. அவருடைய குடும்பத்தை பத்தி பார்க்கும்போது மனைவி பேரு வந்து அமிர்தா எல் கொட்டோவா. அவங்களும் நம்ம காலேஜில் தான் MSW கம்யூனிட்டி டெவலப்மெண்ட் முடிச்சிருக்காங்க. அவருக்கு அழகான ஒரு பையன் ரோஹன் பேரு 6th ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் முடிச்சிருக்காங்க. இப்ப நம்மளுடைய நிகழ்ச்சிக்காக நம்ம ஹன்சன் அவர்கிட்ட பொறுப்புகளை விடுறோம். இனி அவர் நிகழ்ச்சியை தொடர்ந்து வழங்குவார். நன்றி.
So I'm really excited and delighted, and with that short and introduction, I'll just share the presentation. So I'll share my screen. Yeah, so are you able to see my screen?
Yes. Go ahead.
Right, okay, thank you, sir. So yeah, so animals in disasters, the presentation which I'll be talking about is, so before going to the presentation, I would like to give you a short overview about what I'll be talking. So mainly this concept called animals in disaster is something that we as an organization, World Animal Protection, we have been working for the last 55 years globally. And but most of the experiences has been in Latin American countries, South American countries. But only since 2008, this concept has come to India and South Asia. So we are trying to see how this can be promoted, and seeing that how animals also could be considered an important asset and their lives should be valued, and we need to take initiatives to protect them when there is an event of any disaster that could strike. So this, when we say animals in disaster, if you can see the word animals, animals is something a very broad area, because when you talk about animals, we can mean many things to many people. We can talk about companion animals, we can talk about captive animals, we can talk about livestock, we can talk about poultry. So there's a lot of animals and it's so diverse. So but I'll be restricting my talk to what we have been doing as an organization to protect animals, be it the farm sector or the animals in wild. We have broadly 4 areas of programs. That is the animals in wild, which is about how to protect wild animals, the animals in farming, how we protect the farm animals, the animals in disasters, the actual work that we do in disasters to protect animals, that is mainly the livestock, and companion animals, and where which plays an important role for the livelihood and companionship of people, especially the vulnerable communities. And also when we see that there are other animals also, like when you say animals in communities. So I was saying 4 programs: animals in farm, animals in wild, animals in disasters, and animals in communities. Animals in communities means it's more about the stray cattle or stray cows that you can see. We consider them as community animals. So these are some 4 broad programs which World Animal Protection is working on. And so I'll be restricting my talk to these initiatives that we have taken in this area. So with this, in this presentation, I know that we all are being community development field, and we all belong to this particular sector. So it's important that we see how relevant it is, that what we can take for our community development initiatives, or how we could see that this could be helpful in our work or area of interest. So with that, having that in mind, I thought these 2 objectives would be more appropriate. So one is Animals in Disasters campaign. So what is this campaign all about? So I'll share some of my experiences. Second component is about the tools and approaches that we have practiced. Being a community development field, coming from a community development field, I feel that these are something that I got an opportunity to use them. So I'll be sharing some of those tools that I've been using in our work. So these are the two broad objectives which I'll talk about. So the contents I'll be sharing is, the first question that comes to our mind is, why do we need to protect animals from disasters? Often people ask, is it really needed? Do we really need to protect animals? Because there's a lot of need for people itself. And we as a developing country, we need to do a lot for the protection of people. Then where does animal come into the picture? So why protect animals from disasters? I'll be giving you the rationale behind it, and sharing some of the statistics that make it more relevant of why we need to protect animals. And given the COVID situation in the country and globally, how animals are being impacted in COVID-19. And we'll be seeing four perspectives in this, like different perspectives of how we need to address the issues of animals in this COVID pandemic situation. And next, about our specific campaign. As I shared earlier, we have four broad programs, but I'll be talking specifically to the Animals in Disaster campaign because I belong to that campaign. So what are the things that we have been doing in this campaign? And fourth is the community development tools that I got an opportunity to practice wherever we could do and work with the community during our disaster response operations. And finally, some of the challenges and recommendations that I would like to share so that it would be helpful for us to see collectively if there are any way that we could address them together, or if we could have some suggestions or input so that it would be helpful for our work as well. So with that, I'll just move on to the first component. So I was saying, why protect animals from disasters? Often this is a very general statement. When we say that I'm working for animals in disasters, the question that comes to our mind, why, what do you do in protecting animals from disasters? Why do we need to protect animals from disasters? Yeah, this is a very important question. So as you see, there is a global statistics which clearly shows that 1.3 billion people are dependent on animals globally. When I say globally, it's a global statistics which talks about the dependency of animals on people, people on animals, on be it companionship, be it their livelihood, be it different walks of life. This shows the dependency of people on animals. And this is a very important fact that is there before us. Second, if you want to know more specific to our Indian context, in India, if you consider the 100% of the livestock population, 70% of the livestock is owned by 67% of the poor and vulnerable people. I want to stress on the fact that when we say we are working for in disasters, we often work to protect the poor and vulnerable people because they are more prone to disasters and their lives need to be protected. So when we say we are working to protect the poor and vulnerable people, automatically the picture comes into before us that what happens to the 70% of livestock they own? Are you going to ignore them? That really gives us the answer. It really makes it relevant that we really need to protect the 70% of the livestock that is owned by this 67% of poor and vulnerable people in the country. Third statistics I would like to say, as given by the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, which shares a very important fact that 36% of disaster losses are absorbed by the livestock subsector. When I say the disaster losses are getting absorbed, the livestock subsector comes under the agriculture sector, but often it's not highlighted. So what happens here is, it acts as a risk buffer. In any disaster situation, the people's life or assets get devastated, and it makes them really challenging to recover or cope during that situation. And during that situation, it's the livestock that absorbs most of the risk and plays a very important role for them to bounce back to normalcy. So this really contributes much more than any other sector. So it makes it very relevant that we need to ensure that we take measures for the protection of animals in disasters. So having said all these three figures. One is the global statistics, one is the statistics to our India, and one is this FAO statistics is to our Asia Pacific region, to our region as a whole. And more specific, if you want to see closely, there are three more statistics which I would like to share, more specific to the situation of animals in India. 97,000 cattle is lost to floods annually in India. This is a statistics shared by the Central Water Commission. And they share that it's nearly, we can say that 97,000 cattle, almost is 1 lakh cattle is lost to floods every year in India. If you take an average of that, we are losing 256 animals every day. So when I say there is something interesting about this statistics, first of all, I would like to admit to the fact that we don't have enough data, we don't have enough reporting, and we don't have any proper monitoring system to ensure that we have enough data on animal losses and disasters. But having said that, whatever information that we have in hand also clearly shows that there is a significant impact on the lives of animals and the livelihood of people who own these animals. So with that, if you look closely into the statistics, I would like to request you to look at two particular components in this statistics. One is it talks about cattle and it talks about floods, which is, when I said animals is something very, very diverse topic, it has a lot of things, a lot of animals are there, but this statistics talks about only cattle, which is one species. And it talks about disaster is a very general term where there are a lot of disasters. And this statistics also talks about only flood. So one species of animal and one disaster, you get nearly 1 lakh lost every year. So the question automatically comes to our mind is, what happens to other animals and what happens to other disaster? So clearly the answer is, we don't have enough data. We are not having any mechanism to capture them. We don't have any mechanism to see how they can be recorded or reported. So this itself makes it more evident. Then that means we need to take measures to protect animals from disasters. We need to make ensure that we have enough mechanisms in place to see that there is a system to protect the lives of animals and the people who depend on them. So going to the next statistics on livestock management, we often talk about women empowerment, gender equality and all. So if you go by that approach, livestock plays a very significant role in that as well, because 90% of the activities on livestock management is carried out by women. So when I say carried out by women, even in the rural areas, if you take as per our experience, whatever data we have clearly shows, even the livestock is owned by men on record. But if you look more closely on the livestock care and management, the 90% of the activities is carried out by women, which means women has a greater role in the care and management of livestock. So if we acknowledge the fact that women is contributing and playing an important role in livestock management, then it really makes it more important to protect livestock if you need to protect women empowerment and gender equality as well, because it's certainly going to contribute to that sector. Going to the final statistics, it talks about 25% to contribution goes to the agricultural GDP from the livestock sector. So often when we see nationally, when we talk about GDP, the gross domestic product, we often think of the production that's coming from the agriculture sector. The picture that comes to our mind is crops, cereals, pulses, and all that we can get from this sector. But there is something hidden within that, which is the livestock sector. In the form of milk and milk products, it contributes 25%, which is often not highlighted and it's often overlooked. So I would like to stress on this fact that this is a very significant contribution that's coming from the livestock sector, but it's not getting highlighted anywhere because it's getting overshadowed by the agricultural GDP. But this needs to get acknowledged, which means it's contributing a lot to the productivity of the country, food security of the country, as well as for the nation's development. So given all the statistics that we have, clearly shows it makes it more and more relevant and important that we protect animals. Because when we say you're protecting animals, you're not protecting only animals as such as a physical asset or life that you can just see before us, but it's much more than that. It contributes to a diverse sector, which both directly or indirectly are going to protect by protecting animals. So moving on, I would like to again come to another important component to why we need to protect animals from disasters. As we all know, we are, as a country, we are working towards protection of our citizens, people, and diverse sectors, other sectors in the humanitarian field, which we are working. And there is a framework, international framework that has been developed called Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. So this is from 2015 to 2030. So before going into this, I would like to give a brief background about a framework that was much laid before the Sendai framework, which was called as Hugo Framework for Action, HFA, from 2005 to 2015. So in this framework, it was mainly to work towards the protection of different sectors within the humanitarian setting, but there were no component of livestock into that or animal protection mentioned into that. But yeah, I would like to share with you that this framework has a dedicated section which is highlighted on this slide here, section 30P, which clearly says strengthening the protection of livelihood and productive assets, including livestock, working animals, tools, and seeds. So this framework has clearly identified the need to protect animals, which was not there earlier in the HFA. So when we say, what does that mean to India? When we say this has been acknowledged and placed in this international framework, there are 197 countries that have agreed to abide by this framework and fulfill the targets that have been set out in this framework, out of which India is one of the countries, which means India as a country, we need to see how we take measures to protect animals and fulfill the targets that we have set out for the protection of animals as per the Sendai Framework Agreement. And there are other international standards also that have been emerged after, especially after 2009. You might have heard about standards called Sphere standards, because all these standards have started emerging, especially if you look into the shift in the disaster management work. It drastically happened after 2009, because before 2009 and all, there were a lot of disaster management activities happening on the ground on charity-based approach, which is to do charity, which is to contribute to the disaster management field or to the disaster affected victims out of your own free will or your likeness or your good intention to do some work. But these frameworks have emerged because of a major concern on quality and accountability issues. When I say quality and accountability issues, there have been a lot of stakeholders that have stepped into this field and started doing a lot of work for the protection of people and communities in general. But there were a lot of duplication of efforts. There were a lot of problems in transparency, problems in misuse of funds, and a lot of other issues as well. So that really was a major concern, and that's why these international standards have emerged. And all these standards talks about the right to receive assistance. So there is a difference even in this sector when you're working in disaster, because earlier it was a charity-based work. But after these frameworks and standards have come out, it's no more a charity-based work. It's more the right of the victim, that is the disaster-affected victim, to receive assistance than the right of you to do a disaster management work. So the shift is clearly evident and it's clearly there, which even though you have a good intention, you need to be aware of this right that the disaster-affected people and communities have, that they should receive. And they talk about the minimum standards that you need to set forth, that is set forth in the standards that you need to abide with and fulfill. So all these are given in this standards. Likewise, in Sphere project is more a coordination and communication tool. It's more about how you coordinate with different stakeholders to see how you can avoid the duplication of efforts and address the gap areas. And have a very good network in jointly addressing the needs of the disaster affected communities. And the LEGS is another standard, which is a companion standards to the Sphere handbook. LEGS is livestock emergency guidelines and standards, which is an international standards that has come up, and it's more a planning and decision making tool, where if anyone is interested to do any disaster management work for livestock, it helps them. This helps the disaster management practitioners to plan, make decisions, and design programs and projects for planning interventions in the livestock-based interventions, for the livestock-based interventions. And this standards specifically talks about 6 technical interventions and how these six technical interventions need to be planned and implemented. When I say 6 technical interventions, it is like uh, restocking. Restocking is nothing but introducing animals into a disaster affected area that has lost a lot of animals. So we call that restocking of animals. One is destocking or culling. Destocking is reducing the number of animals. If there is an epidemic outbreak, if there is an avian influenza, you need to cull the birds or cull the animals. So what are the measures you take to reduce the number of animals? So we call destocking. Then there is water provision for animals, feed provision for animals, veterinary services, and shelter and settlements. So all these 6 technical areas, how you need to plan your interventions and design, this will help any disaster management practitioners to fulfill the minimum requirement. And there are certain key indicators and guidance notes for you to plan your programs. So moving ahead, again going by legal terms. So that was one was on statistics which I shared. One was on the international frameworks and standards we have in place. And now coming into the legal terms of our country in India, the Constitution of India in part 4A, fundamental duties, have clearly identified that it shall be the duty of every citizen of India to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. So it would like to say this is one of the best provisions that any country has, and India has been very comprehensively captured this particular statement of protecting animals into this constitution, and it has been well thought of and well written and well put in. So this gives each citizen the legal provisions as well as the responsibility for us to take measures to protect animals in general, not only in disasters. Moving on to, so in disaster, you might ask, why protect animals on disaster? Are there any policy in place? Yes, there is a national policy on disaster management, which was released in 2009. And there is a dedicated chapter, chapter 7, which talks about a section called animal care. And in this, I will not read to this entire policy statement. I would just read only the highlighted text here. So it clearly shares that it is necessary to devise appropriate measures to protect animals and find means to shelter and feed them during disasters and their aftermath through a community effort to the extent possible. So this is the policy statement that has been there, that is there since 2009 in this document. And further below, if you look, there is a clear statement that also says the governments, that is also the ministries of the government of India, such as Animal Husbandry and Dairy Development Department, Social Justice and Empowerment, and the states concerned, should devise such measures at all levels. So I would like to stress on the word called all levels. So as per the administrative terms, if you ask what does this all levels means, if you go by administrative terms, all levels means national level, state level, district level, panchayat level, and village level, or any other administrative setups we have, urban local bodies or town panchayat, municipalities, whatever administrative frameworks we have, it applies to all these levels. So that means this policy statement has been clearly states that we need to take measures to protect animals. So moving ahead, so again to that fact on why we need to protect animals. So how is it going to protect people? So this slide particular talks about the fact that by protecting animal, we are not only protecting animals in in isolation. By protecting animals, it helps protect people. So this picture before us shows all the sectors that the animals contribute. And by protecting animals, it clearly shows that it contributes in, we are contributing both directly and indirectly to all these sectors, be it like the work sector, be it the monetary terms, be it the risk buffer, food and nutrition, gender equality, economic growth, and social and cultural aspects. So it contributes to all the sectors. And by protecting animal, it's clear that we protect people. And Yeah, and also to be more specific on species-wise information, what we have. So as I said, we don't have enough data to show that, but there are some data which could also give us, which actually gives us a picture of where and how much of impact disaster has on animals. So if you see here, 198 million livestock is lost to floods every year, and 168 million livestock is, sorry, not lost, it's prone to droughts every year. So when I say prone to floods and prone to droughts, so the significant population of the animals in India are exposed to the disaster environment. So when we say when they are already, when we clearly know that they're exposed to the disaster environment, then why are we not taking measures to protect them? Is it just we want them to die, or is we don't have enough capacity? So I think there will be many questions that will rise on this, but it clearly shows, it certainly has an important say that there really need to be a measure to ensure that we protect animals from disasters. And if you go down more to the picture that clearly shows three species here. One is the bovines. Bovines is more about the cattle, buffalo, and all these categories. If you see, the second is the pig, swines. And then the last, if you see, is the caprines. Caprines are the sheep, goat category and all. So if you see here, if there is a flood, 47% of both cattle and pigs, they get prone to disasters, because this population of cattle and pigs are more in close to the river belt, like Ganga, Brahmaputra river belts, where there are low-lying areas. There are a lot of pig and cattle population that are prone to disasters, prone to flooding. But if you look at drought, in drought, if you see, it's the goat and sheep species that gets more affected. It's 48% of goat and sheep. Because if you see in Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and drought-prone areas, it's the sheep and cattle, sheep and goat population that are more, and they are prone to drought than flooding. And also there are other aspects, but I'll not go in detail to that. There are more social and cultural aspects, ecological and environmental reasons that we need to protect animals, and ethical and religious reasons as well gives us an opportunity to protect animals. And also I would like to highlight a fact that when we say livestock, when a person is affected by disaster, we say that a community is a disaster affected victim, or a person is a disaster affected victim. But when we say livestock is affected, even though livestock is a victim, they're also considered a hope. So they have a dual responsibility. So livestock is both considered a victim and hope for farmers following disasters. So even in the times of suffering, they are a hope for the farmers. So actually, there is a very important phrase, a quote given by Mahatma Gandhi ji, that the greatness of a nation can be judged by the way its animals are treated. So it's more than anything, that it's more about our perception, our mindset, and how we see value other lives as equal to ours. And I know that a human life is of utmost importance and it should be given priority, but it doesn't mean that you can undermine other life as well, because they share the planet equally as we share this planet. So we need to value every life equally and give them the opportunity to live freely in this world that we share with other life forms. So, and also there are now going to another question on, okay, we have heard a lot about why we need to protect animals in disasters. So the next question, okay, how can we protect animals from disaster? Okay, I understand why we need to protect animals. So, but how to protect animals? So the next question is, there are a lot of national plans and guidelines that have developed and which could be helpful for us to see how we can take measures to protect animals. One is in 2008, there is a National Disaster Management Authority's guideline that has been developed on biological disasters. So when you say biological disasters, right now is like COVID-19, as you see, is a biological disaster. So but there is a dedicated chapter 6 which talks about how to manage this. However, there are a lot of gaps, challenges, and resources that we need to have in place. But this guideline will be helpful if you are interested. It's clearly available online to see how we can learn ways of protecting animals in disasters, specifically livestock. they have mentioned here. And 2013, there is a national livestock policy that was released following a conference which we organized with National Disaster Management Authority, and which talks about having contingency plans to protect animals, which is something very important that we need to look into. And 2016 was a very significant year where there were two national disaster management plans that were released, one by the National Disaster Management Authority and another one by Department of Animal Husbandry, Dairy and Fisheries. So here, these two plans are a national disaster management plans, but I would like to say what's the difference in this is, the National Disaster Management Authority's disaster management plan, we as an organization, we provided recommendation for integration of animals in disasters, and that has been successfully integrated. So that is generic plan to all the departments and nodal agencies to work in disasters, where animal component has also been integrated. Second, National Disaster Management Plan is specific to the Department of Animal Husbandry, Dairy and Fisheries, which is the department responsible for animals, what they should do before, during and after a disaster for taking care of animals. So this has been also mentioned and released in 2016 because we could have the plan jointly developed by World Animal Protection and the Department of Animal Husbandry, Dairy and Fisheries, which is also available online. And 2018, there was a disaster scorecard that has been developed by the Ministry of Home Affairs, and where they have identified 14 indicators. These 14 indicators, I would like to also share that what we have seen just a few minutes back on Sendai framework. Sendai framework talks about several targets and indicators. And in order to fulfill those targets and indicators, these 14 indicators have been developed. Out of these 14 indicators, one specific indicator talks about livestock vulnerability index, because earlier we were all talking about whatever work we do in terms of photos and reports and documents. But Sendai framework talks about how you quantify them and how you assess them based on the progress they make. So whatever work we do, it is quantified, be it policy level, be it plan level, be it implementation level. Any initiative we take needs to get quantified in a way to see how you can measure the progress. So this livestock vulnerability index is one of them out of the 14 indicators, is to see how it will be ranked based on the district-wise ranking for the entire country, and to see which district ranks better than the other in taking active, proactive measures for the protection of animals and other sectors as well. Yeah, so this was just about that. And moving on to the other sessions, I was saying that we are going through a very difficult time of COVID-19. Now everything, our entire life has changed, and no one is sure of where we are heading to and how will the future look for all of us. But one thing is very evident, that whatever be the case, we need to find a way to survive and find a way to see how we identify opportunities to work within this challenging environment. That is for sure, because we can't do anything other than that. But I would like to share with you 4 particular perspectives related to animals. When I say animals in COVID, what are the issues? When I say issues from the perspective of the animals itself. So when I see the issue in perspective of issues from the animals itself, the needs of animals are getting compromised. Yeah, I'm not saying is it right or wrong, but I'm just sharing with you the situation, because we know that our priority is to save the life of people, to ensure that we take measures to protect people. But the given situation forces us to see that the animals' needs are getting compromised. And animals are seen as threat. On the other side, if you see, there are false and rumors, messages getting spread that animals is the cause of COVID-19 and we should stay away from animals, kill all the animals. So I think it's something dangerous for animals and they're seeing animals as threat, which is also not a good thing, because we need to go by reliable information and not carried away by rumors or false messages. Animals are getting abandoned. People who own animals in some places have abandoned their animals, which is not a good thing because of the false messages. They are acting in a way that is not good for the animals, because they don't know what they're doing, and due to their ignorance can affect animals as well. And animals not a priority as a whole. So this is the situation from the animals' perspective, what they're going through in the situation. Moving on, what is the perspective of a society on animals? So if you look at the society, there are many components that you see if you look at a house in specific, there is a strained relationship between the owner and the pet owners and the pets and owners, sorry. So if you see, because the situation we are living now has become more challenging than before, because we are working from home, we are like not able to travel, not able to go out anywhere. And this actually gives us a more additional responsibility to do within our limited space, and how you take care of the managing relationship. When I say managing relationship, your own family relationship, as well as the pets that you own. The pet owners have this issues between them, and it is having a strained relationship. If you look at the community as a whole, animals are getting stigmatized, be it media, be it what people say or talk about, or whatever messages is getting circulated. So, but the general thing is the animals are getting stigmatized for some reason. But yeah, so the request is not to get carried away by information that is not from a genuine source. And if you look at livestock sector, there is deficit of feed and fodder, because there has been restriction on the transport of feed and trucks on bringing in feed from a fodder surplus area to a fodder deficit area, which has affected the transportation of feed. And this is affecting many livestock that are deprived of feed and fodder. And if you look at the farm sector, when I say farm sector, it's more about the poultry farm, dairy farm, piggery, and these sectors also. If you see, there are places where people have abandoned their animals because they are not able to get profit. So they have killed them, threw them on the road. So in this, the message is they are seeing the animals as objects. I know that it's a livelihood for that people. At the same time, we also need to acknowledge that there is a life in that. So we need to see that it should benefit the farmer certainly. At the same time, it should also value the life. So this is also an issue of area of concern. Next is captivity. When you look at captivity, there are helpless wild animals and captive animals in the zoos, and even there are many shops where the people own pets. They've kept the shops closed, pet shops closed without feeding for many days. So there are some issues. So these are some issues there within the society where different components that we would like to highlight where there are issues related to animals. Moving on to the third is, what are the issues related to the managing animals from the owner's point of view? The animal owner, actually he has limited space in managing animals, which is itself a challenge. And as we all know, animals, they need a lot of physical activity. They need to be kept physically active, taking them for a walk or making them move around. But with limited space, it becomes more challenging. So animal owners face these challenges. Time management, balancing time for animals and family. Yes, because everyone's at home, and how you manage your time with your family and pet is a challenge. Relationship management. Here, if you see, managing neighbors' perspective. So there are certain neighbors. There are all types of neighbors. There are people who love animals. At the same time, there are also people who hate animals. There are people who dislike animals. So how you manage them? So managing neighbors' perception on animals also is a challenge for the people who own animals. And finally, the hygiene. Extra hygiene care for animals. Yeah, because more than before, we need to take extra care on hygiene of pets, because pets can be like we are carriers of virus. They could also be a carrier of virus. It doesn't mean that animal is the only cause of the virus, but they are a transmitter. We could also be a transmitter. So extra hygiene need to be followed, which is also a challenge. So these are some challenges. And moving on to the fourth perspective, one is from the animal perspective, one is from the society, one is from the owners, and this is from the organizations. When I say organization, it's like people who work for animals, veterinary university, veterinary community, veterinary stakeholders, and all who have working directly for the benefit of, for the welfare of animals. So there are restricted offline activities, unable to do any work for the welfare of animals is a challenge because they are not a priority. Focus on online activities and indirect help to animals. How can indirect help reach an animal is also not easy. It's a challenge. Coordination with stakeholders are getting slow because we are working remotely, and more than before, it is becoming difficult to communicate and see how we exchange views from different point of contacts on this. Resource constraint in see how we mobilize the required resources and funding, because we know that there is an economic fall and funding constraints of many organizations, and resources have been cutting short for many of the sectors. So this is also a challenge for organizations that are taking responsibility for protection of animals. So I would like to share, these are the four perspectives. So I would like to again reiterate the fact that whatever I said is nothing is right, nothing is wrong. This is the situation before us, but how we address it, how we see it is more important. So moving on to Animals in Disaster Initiative. So what is the initiative that we take as an organization? In general, I would like to say this is the 5 broad areas in front of us that we work. One is legal frameworks and resources. How we can ensure we have adequate legal frameworks in the country. As I said, we are working in based on the experiences we have gathered from different countries. The best practices are being shared to different countries. So it's more about cross learning between different countries and ensuring we have enough legal frameworks and resources in the place so that opportunities and can evolve for the welfare of animals. Second component is baseline information. As I said, we don't have enough data, and we need to have mechanisms for creating that system for monitoring, reporting, and documenting animal-related data. Next is the disaster response protocol. Protocol is more about how we work in disasters to protect animals. We have been working with different veterinary universities in the country and seeing how they can take measures, how they can deploy their teams, veterinary doctors or any other local partners or community members who could help us. So what is the mechanism? We have a system called Veterinary Emergency Response Unit, and we have a curriculum which we try to see how we train them and see how these protocols and measures can be planned during response operations. Then there is capacity building. So when I say capacity building, it's about training different stakeholders. We have been imparting training different diverse stakeholders on disaster management and veterinary related background on how they can play a role and use their expertise in protecting animals. And finally is the culture of preparedness. So when I say culture of preparedness, it's more about the specifically the community, how we work with the community, ensure that they are aware of the actions they can take, simple actions and simple meaningful actions that they could play, which could save them and their animals from the disasters. So these are in broad overview. And these three things we try to see that how we can integrate animal protection in the humanitarian sector. And also we try to end cruel industrial farming and wildlife trade practices, which are the root. We consider this as the root cause of all major issues because of the epidemic, emerging and re-emerging zoonotic diseases. We try to see that how this can be, we can put an end to such cruel practices. And finally, integrate animal protection into the insurance and financial sectors disaster strategies. So we might ask, there are, because we still don't have enough insurance mechanisms for animals in disasters. Might ask, there is already a livestock insurance scheme, but yeah, it is named as livestock insurance scheme. But if you look more closely, it is farmer insurance only. When I say why is it farmer insurance? Because the insurance is there, when you lose an animal, the farmer will get the benefit. So the question comes is, how does the animal benefit? The animal is in no way going to benefit. It's the farmer that will benefit. In that case, it's only a farmer insurance. So when we say livestock insurance, are there components where health is going to benefit, or is the animal's life going to improve, or is the productivity going to improve? If these three answers, if we have an answers to these three things, then it's a livestock insurance. If we don't have answers to all these three questions, then it's a farmer insurance. So these are some things that we still need to emerge in the insurance and financial sector in the disaster area, because that is an area of work which we are also trying to work with the insurance sector. So moving on to our global level, what we are also doing is we have working with different international humanitarian organizations like IFRC, International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, where a concept called best practice animal management. It is like sharing of best practices from different countries and seeing how they can take measures for the protection of animals. So we have been taking in different regions and ensure that they can play an active role, because they have a global presence in all countries and they have a wide base. So series of trainings are planned, and they are also seeing how animal component could be included. So sorry, I'm not spending much time on this slide because I would like to rush. I don't know how much time is there, so I will make it quick. And there are advocacy areas that we also work on to see. So these are some series of advocacy initiatives which we have been taking since 2015, 2016 to now. In 2020, we are focusing on bank, financial insurance institutions and insurance sectors to see how they can ensure insurance programs and financial mechanisms are in place for protection of animals. So, and the response we have been doing, we have 6 VERUs, as I said, veterinary emergency response units in the country, and 6 DLOs. DLOs are disaster liaison officers. We have in Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and India. So we are working with these stakeholders in our region. And these are some of the snapshots of the response work that we have done in India, in the different places, different states we have done. So just a snapshot of that. So these are some of the training and capacity building initiatives which we have done with the National Institute of Disaster Management and different administrative training institutes, Department of Animal Husbandry, and disaster management staff. We are also training the National Disaster Response Force on how to protect animals from disasters. And in addition to this, we are doing simulation exercise and mock drills. When I say mock drill, usually mock drills are done in school environment, hospitals, cinema theaters, for protection of people on how safely they can evacuate. So here we are also trying to see how we can train NDRF, who are the rescue personnel, on rescuing animals from disasters. We use dummy animals for actual rescue component, but in the treatment drill, we use the real animals, because we know that we are doing a mock drill, but the animals will not know that it's a mock drill. So these are some things over since 2012 we have been doing, and we could see the benefits in 2013, 14, and recent years where NDRF have started. They've integrated animal rescue as part of their mandate, which was not there earlier. Yeah. And public awareness we have been doing through our VERU units. As I said, this is one of the picture in Bihar Veterinary College, where we have VERU teams for awareness, street plays, puppet shows, exhibitions before monsoon, so that farmers can get sensitized on how simple and best practices they can use for protecting animals. As I said, VERU, so these are the 6 VERUs we have in the country: Himachal Pradesh, Chennai, Guwahati, Anand, Madhya Pradesh, and Patna. Out of this, we are trying to see how they can become sustainable. So 3 have already become sustainable. When I say sustainable, VERU South Zone, Chennai, they could get a fund from the state government, and likewise in Gujarat and Bihar, and have established relationship with the government at the state level to carry out their activities. So other states, other 3 states, we are working out to see how they can also become sustainable. And this is a VERU team who got trained through our VERU program, and they were really involved in a response operation in Assam. Now also there is a response operation going on the last couple of weeks in Assam, where our teams are still treating animals there. So here the concept behind this is, this particular line which is there on this slide is, encourage the spirit of volunteerism and go beyond the call of duty. It is mainly volunteerism. Usually we consider volunteers are much lower than staff, or lower than actual normal staff working in an organization. But we inculcate a practice of volunteerism, saying that volunteerism is the most highest level people contributing to this sector, because they are not working for a job. They're working beyond their call of duty, which is much more than a job. So we consider that they contribute more than a normal person working in an organization. So this helps. We are trying to see, we are strengthening the veterinary institutions in the country by promoting this concept of volunteerism and veterinary professionals. So likewise, this volunteer, even in this COVID, we were engaging volunteer for in Delhi, in some of the places, to come out and help animals. And also responsible pet ownership. We have an initiative online, which there is a link given here. If anyone could log in. If you have a pet, you can sign in and get a free pack for a responsible pet ownership pack, and to see what checklist and what measures you need to take to protect your pet. And there are certain do's and don'ts, simple do's and don'ts, because there are, as I said before, there are a lot of fake messages, rumors making the rounds. So we have come out with simple do's and don'ts for animals, and this is the link here in this slide, and also this message.
Sorry, Hanson.
Yes.
Hanson, கொஞ்சம் கலந்து கொஞ்சம் தமிழ்லையும் பேசினீங்கன்னா கொஞ்சம் நல்லா இருக்கும். ஏன்னா அது வந்து கொஞ்சம்
Vijayanand,
போகும். சாரி
Vijayanand,
sorry.
Vijayanand, you are too late. Session is முடிய போகுது. Hanson, please continue.
Okay, thank you, Vijay, thank you, sir. Sorry, I went
So no problem.
very
No
fast, or I didn't make anyone clear. Please, my apologies, and sure, and I will try to.
Yeah, no problem.
இல்ல இல்ல
share.
ஹேன்சன் நல்லா
sir.
தான் போயிட்டு இருக்கு, நீங்க கண்டினியூ பண்ணுங்க.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So these are some of the do's and don'ts, and there are certain question and answers also, because there are a lot of queries coming on our system on how to protect. So there is a link on everything you need to know about coronavirus and pets. You can visit this link to know all answers for how, if there are any queries that you have, it's already answered on this website, just for your information. And we also come out with a course called PrepVet. It's an online course. There is a link called animalsindisasters.org. So if anyone want to do this course, it's fully free of cost. There are 11 modules in this course, and it's a self-paced course. When I say self-paced, you can start at your own time, stop anywhere, and again continue from anywhere you have left. And there are 11 modules, and approximately it will take, I think, 1 month or 2 months, depending on your speed to learn different modules. And end of each module, there is a small question, a test to you need to clear, so that you can make the other module active and you can learn the other module. And by end of the 11th module, you will get a certificate from World Animal Protection for this course. So we are trying to see with the universities in India, we are promoting this. Already we are going to use, this course is put up in Tanuas, Madras Veterinary College University. This course is also put up in Himachal Pradesh University. And even in other universities in the country, we are putting up this course. And globally as well, we are being promoting this through United Nations. There is an initiative called GETI, Global Education Training Institute in United Nations, where we are trying to see how this can be promoted on United Nations platform. And also we are planning to come out with an award for how this award can be provided to the people who successfully use this. So this is a 1-minute video. I know because of interest of time, I'm not going to the video. This is just a 1 minute. If you're interested, you can see. And some tools which I shared that we used in disasters. This is I'll go quickly to that. The social mapping, which we have done in one of the village on how to do the social mapping. Transect walk, for what are the parameters we measure using transect walk for animals. Just a snapshot of that. We have done the historical timeline and trend changes of interacting with people to understand the trend changes in the animal practice, management practices. And social mapping exercises with the communities. This was in Maharashtra, how they take care of their animals and so on. And seasonality calendar mapping exercises with communities to see which are the different seasons and how they prioritize their work and plan according to the seasons. And mapping of animal resources, both within the village and outside the village. So in an event of disaster, we know what they lack and what they have to manage their animals. And there are Venn diagrams. When I say this, Venn diagrams to understand the relationship. One is the size denotes the importance of the organization, and the distance denotes the relationship. So we try to assess in which relationships is stronger and which needs to be improved. And we try to work based on the existing relationship they have with different stakeholders. Moving on, we also have household veterinary surveys being carried out to see how this can be done. This is on random basis. And we mainly assess the health, productivity, and economic value of animal based on this. So it's like very quick, short, and immediately you will be able to assess the 3 parameters. And daily routine chart of the people of how to understand their lifestyle in managing animals. And we also have the prioritizing of problem, because usually everyone has their own priority of problem. But how do you prioritize the problem from a community's perspective? So we do this pairwise, that is cross problem matrix, and we prioritize the problem of which one we need to address first and which one later. And there are things that how we understand, we might be understanding that animals are important, but we also need to understand, are the community really feeling the same way? So we try to understand their perspective if they were a cattle. So it is like, if I were a cattle, from that point of view, how are their practices? So in this, we understand and assess what they expect for their animals, what is in practice, has there been any disasters impacted animal, and how has it been impacted? So we understand from the community's perspective how they are perceiving animals and how they want to take measures to protect animals. Finally, these are a little bit only veterinary doctors can do and all, but we have come out with a system called traffic light chart, which anyone can do. Even a paravet or a local volunteer can do this. Only simple thing is we need to have the different body parts of animals and different health indicators that have been broken down. So if you take a body part of a leg, leg has different health indicators. Eye has different health indicators. And by looking at the health indicators, they just need to put a green, yellow or red light. That is a health indicator. So it's like an instant veterinary health checkup based on health indicators of different body parts. Based on this, you understand whether generally is this village having a healthy animals or they need any veterinary intervention or it's not required, or minor intervention required. So it is like an instant health checkup. Finally, we come out with a wealth ranking. This wealth ranking is something different from the government's wealth ranking of BPL system, which we know if you go to a village, we ask who is poor, they will say all are poor, all are BPL families. But here we try to understand wealth as per community's criteria, because we consider wealth as every community's perspective as a unique perspective, and every community has their own way of defining wealth. So we try to understand, they might say, we don't want to call any of us rich. Okay, we call us poor, very poor, extremely poor. So what are the criteria? So they give their own criteria based on land, type of house, occupation, or how they borrow money, and they categorize the houses according to that. So this is may differ from every village to everywhere because it's very unique, and it gives the uniqueness of every village on how they perceive wealth and assess their own community. Finally, challenges, as I said, there is one health and one welfare, which we try to see, because we are living in a planet where it's not only for people, it's for all life forms. So we need to share the world. So we need to see how we ensure health of animals and people, as well as wealth of animals and people. So one health, one welfare, how we balance it is a challenge. Animal protection inclusive policies we need to have. Biosecurity protocols is a challenge. We need a lot of research and resources for animal protection. Finally, if you ask what is the recommendation as an organization, we need to have institutional mechanisms in place for the animal disaster management. And the government could allocate more resources for the veterinary universities or veterinary emergency response unit for such initiatives, and proactive measures for stopping illegal wildlife trade and intensive factory farming for spread of diseases. When I say illegal wildlife trade, to give you an overview, as per the Niti Aayog's National Forest Policy, 33% of forest cover should be the minimum forest cover for our country, whereas at the given situation we only have 26%, which is much below the minimum requirement, which itself says that the forests are shrinking and the habitat is shrinking, which poses a lot of threat to wildlife, and we are losing animals, and it's obviously going to affect people. So these are some of the things which I thought I could share, and I would like to request this hashtag, don't forget animals. It's not, I don't want to say that we only need to protect animals. No, the point I would like to make is we also need to protect animals by protecting people equally. And for more information, you can visit worldanimalprotection.org. And I would like to thank Dayalan sir, Rajeshwari madam, Bhavani madam, organizing team, and all senior faculties, colleagues, friends. And please apologize if I was very quick or if I said something that you couldn't understand, but I'm happy to answer and have a discussion with you all. Thank you.